How to answer the questions for English Literature Paper 2. In this video, we will look at Section A of Paper 2. This is the modern text section, and for you, it means answering a question on J.B. Priestley's and Inspector Calls. Specifically in the video, we will look at the format of the questions, how to plan your answers, advice on using quotations, and final tips. For Section A of Paper 2, you'll be answering a question on an Inspector Calls. Play, you will have a choice between two questions, which for the purposes of this video are the two which you can see on screen now. Notice how there are two sets of marks. 1 out of 30, which is based on the quality of your answer, and 1 out of 4, which is for the accuracy of spelling, punctuation and grammar. You have 45 minutes to write your answer. Whilst not 100% guaranteed, you can expect a question focused on a character from the play, and another question which mentions a key theme or idea. In the example questions, Sheila is the subject of a task, whilst the other question is on the theme of selfishness. However, if you're writing about a character, you should still be discussing themes and vice versa. Please also bear in mind that a character-based question could ask you to consider two or more characters, for example, the younger generation, or a question may link a character and theme together, such as the on-screen example which links Sheila with ideas about society. In other words, read the questions carefully. Which question you should answer is entirely up to you. There's no trick. Neither question will be more or less generously marked. You just need to choose whichever task with which you feel you can do the best job. Nevertheless, if it is still a 50-50 choice, then select the themes-based question, because writing about the ideas behind the play will make it a little more straightforward to access marks higher up the mark scheme. You should spend up to 5 minutes thinking through and planning your answer. For a character-based question, this basic 6-part plan is suggested. Begin with a general overview of what the character is like. Comment on what the stage directions from the beginning of the play suggest about them. Explain their involvement with Eva. Describe how they react to the inspector's questioning. Comment on what they're like after the inspector has left. Finish with a final summary which answers the question in a sentence or two. Let's apply this to the Sheila question shown earlier. Overall, Sheila is a character who learns a harsh lesson about responsibility and accepts her selfishness. By the play's end, she symbolises hope for the future. The opening stage directions, very pleased with life and rather excited, suggest that she is a little silly and naive, an impression reinforced by referring to her parents as mummy and daddy. Her dealings with Eva illustrate her bad temper and vanity, as she has Eva sacked out of pettiness and spite. She responds openly and honestly to the inspector's questioning and takes full responsibility for her actions. Later, she encourages others, such as Gerald and her mother, to be similarly open and truthful. In some ways, she acts as the inspector's assistant. Even when the inspector is proved to be a fake, she still insists, along with her brother Eric, that there are lessons for her and the rest to learn about responsibility and taking care of those less well off in society. She now calls her parents mother and father, symbolising her newfound maturity. By the end, she understands how she has misused her privileged position in society and is determined to treat everyone with respect. Now, what you can see on the screen is more detailed and neater than the plan you would write in the exam, but it needs to be clear for you to read. You can see that the plan effectively tracks how Sheila changes across the play from beginning to end. This also helps to give a simple structure to your answer. A model answer based on this plan is available to download from either the Frog ETV page or our YouTube site. Details are on the screen. For the theme-based questions, it's a little more complicated, but here's a hopefully straightforward plan. Begin with an overview of the theme and briefly explain what Priestley wants the audience to think about the theme. Move on to how the older generation, i.e. Mr. and Mrs. Burling, link to the theme. Repeat for the younger generation, Sheila and Eric. Finally, do the same for Gerald, remembering that at first he seems to take his share of the blame for Eva's death, but then goes back on this by the end of the play. It's important to tie the theme to the inspector's final speech about the need for the rich to take responsibility for the poor, before concluding by summing up an answer to the question in a couple of sentences. Turning to the earlier question example, selfishness and its effects in Inspector Calls, we can use the basic plan like so. Selfishness is a symptom of the Burlings and Gerald's irresponsibility. Priestley wants the audience to be less self-centered and focus on the needs of others, particularly the working class, who are often the victim of the selfishness of the rich. Mr. and Mrs. Burling remain persistently selfish. Mr. Burling wants to make as much money as possible for himself, so refuses to give his employees a well-deserved pay rise. His wife insists that her actions in turning down Eve's application for charity were justified and does not accept any blame at all. On the other hand, Sheila and Eric recognise and accept that their selfish behaviour, forcing Eva's sacking from Millwards for no good reason, using Eva as an object for sex, contributed to Eva's suicide and resolve to be selfless in the future. Gerald, who was kind to Eva still, in the end used her to satisfy his own desires, which he genuinely seems to regret, but once he's worked out that the inspector is a hoax, he backpedals and appears to return to his selfish ways. In his speech, the inspector reminds the Burlings and us that we don't live alone and that we are members of one body. Therefore, we cannot be thinking of ourselves. In conclusion, the effects of selfishness in the play is the tragic and unnecessary death of an innocent woman because none of the Burlings or Gerald stopped to think about her feelings and needs. Again, a model answer based on this plan is available to download from either the ETV page or YouTube site. For both sets of plans, there are many other points which could be made. In the end, you only really have a maximum of 35 minutes writing time, so focus on your strengths and write about those aspects of the play you feel most confident about. Do try, however, to cover as much of the play as possible. There are different ways of using quotations. The add-on. Don't write, I know this because the play says, just use a colon, much quicker and better. The aside, using either brackets or dashes. The integrated quote. This is the best one to use, as it gives the impression that you are exploring the text and helps to give a flow to your answer. By the way, these different ways work for all the literature questions and the reading sections of the language papers. You don't need to worry too much about writing the quotation out exactly correct. The examiner is pretty forgiving and will credit miswording quotations. All the examples on screen are fine. If you can't think of the quotation or aren't very good at memorizing quotations, remember that specific references are just as good. Here are a couple of example points with a quotation each. And the same points, but with specific references instead. Both get equal credit. The important thing is to support your points with clear and precise evidence from the text. It helps to A, show what you mean, and B, make your argument more convincing. Allow 5 minutes to check your work carefully. Make sure your points are clear, well supported, and relevant to the question. As spelling, punctuation and grammar are being marked, make sure as well to check for this. At the very least, make sure you have put capital letters at the start of all the characters' names and titles in the case of Mr. and Mrs. Burling and Inspector Gould. It is likely that your answer will be at least on the 3rd page somewhere, unless you have very small handwriting. However, don't be tempted to spend more than 45 minutes on the question in total. Divide the 45 minutes as follows: 5 minutes planning, 35 minutes writing, 5 minutes checking. Finally, think hard, dig deep, and use the opportunity to impress the examiner with the depth and breadth of your understanding of inspector calls. Do yourself proud. You've worked hard these past 2 years, and you want the examiner to know it. Good luck and take care.